Been a few days since I put a video up, and it's good to be back and get back into the swing of things a little bit. So here I am, and a couple of days delay, but nonetheless, my updated 2022 NFL mock draft is available. All 32 picks of round one are in the description box below. This is the post wildcard round edition, so you've got your first 24 picks are kind of set in stone now, and that allows me to feel a little bit better of understanding like potential scenarios and so forth, or at least starting to feel them out. Long way to go in this process. You got 3+ months. You still got whatever is going to be the combine this year, pro days, individual workouts, you name it. But it's still a good time to talk about themes and trends and patterns, just some things that I envision could happen, some things I could see happen, see what happens if this goes this way. Starting off with the number one pick, which, you know, it's the number one pick for a reason. It's the marquee of marquee spots in the draft. And with the Jacksonville Jaguars, it's hard to know right now because they, along with several other teams, you don't know who their head coach is going to be. So hard to know what type of system they're picking for, what type of scheme they're picking for, what type of philosophy, identity that they're selecting players for. So it's a bit of a crapshoot right now with them and with several other teams in the draft. As of now, we don't know who it's going to be. In a couple of cases, you don't even know who the GMs are going to be. But when I look at the Jags, I look at it this way. Trevor Lawrence certainly had a disappointing 2021 season. Period. The Jags could use upgrades at every position on their roster, well, up to and including Trevor Lawrence, but probably not very reasonable to be thinking about replacing a quarterback 1 year after you took him number one overall in the draft. That's just not reasonable. That's not a good way to do business, even for Jacksonville. Duval football! Another year, another time that Jacksonville's picking at the top of the draft. But you'll see a lot of talk about Thibodeaux from Oregon and Hutchinson from Michigan, the two edge rushers, and debate about whether or not they go number one in this draft or not. And I wonder, now maybe I've got the wrong guy in this slot, but if you're going to be drafting somebody in the trenches and you're the Jags, why would you be looking at the defensive side of the ball? Wouldn't you instead be looking at the offensive side of the ball? Because that's where the future lies. Whether or not Trevor Lawrence develops or not is of premium utmost importance to the entire organization. Because if he develops, it makes everything else better. He will make everybody else better. He will make that team better. And do you really feel confident if you're the Jags in the offensive line that you've got? Like the Cam Robinsons and the Jawan Taylors of the world, like, are these the guys that you really trust, you know, those level of guys at tackle to be blocking for Trevor Lawrence? So I've got Evan Neal slated here, number one out of Alabama, the offensive tackle, because I'm sorry, but if you're the Jags and you're in that spot and you're picking between offensive and defensive linemen, the pick here has to be offensive line, especially if it's close in terms of talent, if it's close in terms of your grading. You have to go with the need, and the far bigger need is on the offensive line. The far bigger need is to help and protect Trevor Lawrence, period. Good does it do if you get a big-time edge rusher if you can't protect your fucking quarterback? So all this talk about edge rusher going number one, it could happen. It's potential. But I don't think it's as much of a slam dunk as everybody's making it out to be. I'm not necessarily dying on the Kenny Pickett's going number two to Detroit hill at this time. I certainly expect, as much as people are downplaying this quarterback class and saying it's not that great, that you'll see some names potentially rise a little bit. Too quarterback desperate of a league right now for a few of these guys to not go round one and potentially a couple of these guys even go high. I'm just saying I'm not so sold on the Lions taking somebody in the trenches, especially on the defensive side of the ball with that second pick. Because they have to get the quarterback. And you'll have people that'll say, well, you could swing back around at the tail end of round one and take the quarterback there. But will it be the right quarterback? Is the quarterback that you're going to want going to be there? Is the quarterback that's going to fit what you do? The quarterback that you need, is he going to be there? There's no guarantee of that. So I'm just saying, like, you look at this draft and some of the positions that the Lions would potentially be drafting, is pretty deep there. Quarterback is less deep. They have to get the quarterback. Now, whether that is Pickett or not, or whether or not any of these quarterbacks ever end up being even deemed worthy of a top 5 or top 10 pick will remain to be seen. I'm not sure that I'm fully convinced yet, but I'm just saying, again, the whole talk about this. In some ways, it reminds me a little bit of 2013, a different draft. A draft that we thought about back then was really bad, and you've heard people talk about over the years as really bad. But when you look at some of the names that were actually drafted, the top of the draft sucked for the most part, but there's some really good players, potential Hall of Famers, the Lane Johnsons, the Travis Kelce's, Honey Badger, so forth. There's some pretty damn good players in that draft. What I'm getting at here is when you were getting close to the end of that 2012 college season, a lot of people were talking about, you saw a lot of the media, a lot of draft folks were talking about DeMontre Moore and Bjorn Werner being like two of the top picks or the top two picks and debating between those two and how criminally, fundamentally wrong they were on that. Now, I do think that the edge rushers we're talking about this cycle are much better than those guys, but I'm just pointing out that there's a comparison there of, these guys, it happens every year, some of these presumptive top picks don't go nearly as high as you envision. Houston is going to be interesting because we don't know, again, who their head coach is going to be, and we don't know exactly how they feel about Davis Mills. Like, do they feel that Davis Mills could be the guy? We also don't know what's going to happen with the Deshaun Watson situation and whether he's going to get traded, what type of draft haul the Texans will get back in return. A lot remains to be seen. For now, I slotted Thibodeaux there because they certainly could use talent all over the place. And, when you look at the value and you look at the talent available, Thibodeaux certainly makes a world of sense. What might be a little more controversial, just like with the last mock draft, is I had Ojabo, the edge rusher for Michigan, going a few picks ahead of Aidan Hutchinson. And I think that's just a matter of, when you look at Ojabo, when you watch the film, he just jumps out more. It's not saying Hutchinson is bad, but Ojabo has the type of physical skills and the physical talents and the explosiveness that you feel much better about drafting incredibly high. Whereas a guy like Hutchinson profiles as somebody you'd take more in like the 10 to 20 kind of range. Doesn't mean he's a bad prospect, doesn't mean a bad player. But I think if you go back and watch the film on both of these guys, you'll see one guy stands out a little bit more in terms of projectable NFL traits, and I don't believe it to be Hutchinson. When you look at the Giants with the 5th and 7th pick, if they're not going to draft a quarterback, remains to be seen what new general manager Joe Schoen's going to do. Then they're just going to take talent, you would think. Certainly beefing up the offensive line is going to be important, especially if you want to bring Danny Dimes back for some dumb dick reason in 2022. And then Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame. Now, do I have some trepidation about taking Hamilton there? Maybe, especially for the Giants. But they need guys that can be big-time players for them. Carolina taking Matt Corral at number 6. I hate to do it to Matt Corral because why in the hell would you want him anywhere around Matt Rule? Because Matt Rule is a moron. But the Panthers can't possibly be thinking that they're going into 2022 with Sam Darnold and Cam Newton as their top 2 quarterbacks and thinking that's okay, do they? Like, you think, even if you believe, and it's reasonable to believe right now that Detroit may not value quarterback that highly with their 2 first-round picks, but you have to think like Carolina is the benchmark in terms of that 6th pick. There has to be a quarterback goes there, either to them or somebody else trading up to that slot. You would have to think. They can't be insane enough to go another year without addressing that position. That's all I'm saying. As you look throughout the rest of the draft, though, because I can't really cover all of the picks in the time that I have available, got other stuff to do. Some of the things that stand out, there's definitely some good edge rushing prospects in the top 2 rounds of this draft this year. I think offensive line, this is a great class. Like, I've got an interior lineman like Linderbaum going 10th overall. You look at it overall, I've got 4 offensive linemen in the top 10, and I'm just counting now 5, 6, 7. So 7 offensive linemen in round 1, several of them profiling into the top 10. It's a good draft for the trenches. So if you're a team that maybe has your quarterback, but you want to beef up your trenches, it's a pretty good draft for that. I think it's also going to be interesting to see how the wide receiver position plays out. It seems like it's a pretty good class, but one of those classes, again, maybe somewhat similar to last year, that you have a little bit of trouble differentiating, like from guy 1 to guy 8 or 9, and some of it's going to be about fit and talents and what they do and what those teams do with their systems in terms of where some guys may fall out. But it looks like it's going to be another pretty good wide receiver class as well. But nonetheless, I come back to this, is that we've got a long ways to go and a lot of things yet to be determined. So I am not feeling rigid on any of those things that I've just said here, and they very well could change in a couple of months.